Imagine being labeled the Swiss Army knife of defense when you're drafted 8th overall. That was Isaiah Simmons. Both he and Hardman were released on final roster cutdown day, the 53-man deadline, after signing one-year, low-guarantee deals. Simmons arrived in Green Bay with the task of proving he could finally settle into one role. On the other side, Hardman was the complete opposite, a specialist, speed wideout, return man, Super Bowl hero, yet both ended the same way in Lambeau, cut before week 1. Which failure costs the team more? A player with too many possible roles, or one with only one? To answer that, let's start with Simmons. Isaiah Simmons' story in Green Bay was framed as a final test. Could a former top pick with rare athletic tools succeed when given one defined job? Coming out of Clemson, he was sold as the prototype of a positionless defender, fast enough to handle receivers, powerful enough to blitz, and versatile enough to line up almost anywhere. Drafted 8th overall by Arizona, his adaptability earned him hype as a do-it-all weapon. But in the NFL, the same flexibility that once looked innovative turned into uncertainty. After stints with the Cardinals and Giants, Simmons arrived in Green Bay on a one-year deal, this time with a clear mandate, play inside linebacker, and nothing else. The Packers hoped that simplifying things would spark stability. Instead of rotating through multiple alignments, Simmons was told to focus on reading plays and making tackles. This approach wasn't accidental. The team wanted to see if narrowing his role would finally convert traits into production. To answer that question, they gave him every chance. He logged a team-high 129 defensive snaps during the preseason, far more than most veterans would ever be asked to play. The volume made the evaluation clear. Simmons wasn't disappearing on the field, but the mistakes kept stacking up. Across those 3 exhibitions, he missed 4 tackles, stood a step late in zone coverage, and struggled with angles in space. There were flashes chasing down a ball carrier or disrupting a quick screen, but they arrived inconsistently, scattered between breakdowns. Coaches didn't need small samples to wonder if he might turn the corner. They already had extended tape showing that the same issues from earlier stops still lingered. For a player fighting for a roster spot, almost wasn't enough, especially when younger linebackers looked steadier and more reliable in limited chances. Then came the cap calculation. Simmons' contract was designed as a low-cost bet, a one-year veteran minimum deal with a $167,500 signing bonus. The financial risk looked minimal at first, but roster timing changed the math. Because Simmons was a vested veteran, his full salary would have been guaranteed if he remained on the 53-man roster after week 1. That meant keeping him carried not just a roster spot, but a locked-in cap hit. For the Packers, the choice came down to gambling that his inconsistency would improve, or cutting ties before guarantees locked them into extra cost. The decision was swift. The gamble on one defined role hadn't paid off, and Simmons became a final cut casualty. It was a reminder that in today's NFL, athletic potential means little if consistency doesn't follow, especially when roster deadlines collide with financial guarantees. Green Bay's decision wasn't about doubting his talent. It was about determining the value of patience and deciding the price wasn't worth paying. Simmons' release illustrates how preseason usage combined with veteran guarantee rules can quickly flip a low-risk signing into a roster liability. The Packers didn't want to wait for flashes to turn into reliability, and the contract timing forced their hand. But while Simmons lost out because his role was undefined, another cut came from the opposite problem, being locked too tightly into one dimension. Hardman's decline in Green Bay shows what happens when a specialist edge fades outside the system that once amplified it. His game is highly scheme-dependent, built on speed, motion, and misdirection. When deployed in Andy Reid's offense with Kansas City, he thrived. Reid manufactured touches through jet sweeps, exotic sets, and vertical shots designed to spring him loose, often drawing attention away from Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. That environment maximized his straight-line burst and gave him big-stage moments, including the game-winning touchdown and Super Bowl LV theme. Those credentials created real expectations when the Packers signed him. Fans and coaches remembered the highlight reel, a former Pro Bowl returner, a player who had flipped momentum in playoff games, a champion with a reputation for turning limited opportunities into big plays. The front office angled for that spark on a short, affordable deal. 1 year at the veteran minimum with a $150,000 signing bonus. No other guarantees. It was a classic low-cost bet, the kind you hope pays off in depth and instant field position. But the reality in Green Bay was much different. The Packers' offense under Matt LaFleur leaned on rhythm passing and structured route trees rather than manufactured gadget touches. Unlike Kansas City, the playbook didn't revolve around constant motion tailored to create one-on-one openings for players like Hardman. Without those design advantages, his speed was still visible, but it became ordinary within the flow of the system. Instead of popping off the screen, he looked interchangeable. The production told the story clearly. In 12 games, he managed just 12 receptions for 90 yards and a few token end-arounds. The box score became a weekly reminder that his skill set wasn't translating into impact. On tape, the lanes that once looked wide in Kansas City had narrowed. There weren't sudden bursts behind distracted defenses, no momentum swinging returns, no improvisation that flipped a game's energy. In Green Bay, every catch looked routine rather than explosive. That mismatch between resume and reality mattered. Fans could point to a Super Bowl TD and hope lightning struck again, but the coaching staff had to balance longer-term priorities. Each snap given to Hardman meant one fewer rep for rising receivers building chemistry with Jordan Love, players the team actually saw as part of its future roster core. Investing time in an established veteran who didn't stand out no longer made sense in a lineup built to grow together. Financially, cutting him wasn't complicated. With only a $150,000 signing bonus at stake, the Packers had full flexibility to move on the moment it became clear the fit wasn't there. The same terms that gave him an audition also made his release painless. It wasn't a vindictive decision, it was math. If the gap between ceiling and actual impact is wide, and younger players are proving steadier, a low-risk veteran becomes expendable. Hardman's story underscores the thin line for specialists. His value was undeniable in the right scheme, but without a playbook crafted to unlock his speed, he had no secondary identity to fall back on. That's why his release carried less surprise in the front office than outside it. His defined role wasn't broad enough to justify a roster spot, when younger, more adaptable options existed. Where Simmons was risky because he might become something but never did, Hardman was risky because he had no value unless the system bent in his favor. Both cases led the Packers to the same conclusion: cut early and keep building forward. In the end, the releases of Simmons and Hardman highlight how roster choices come down to 3 repeating factors. Performance. Preseason tape matters because heavy usage doesn't hide weaknesses, it magnifies them. Financials, contract structures, and week 1 guarantees can tip the balance even more than raw ability. Development. When decisions are tight, teams lean toward players who accelerate growth for the future. For agents, front offices, and players, these moves show how performance, fit, and timing intersect to decide jobs. Simmons versus Hardman. Different wagers, same result. Cut when the math doesn't work. Which cut made the most sense to you? The upside gamble or the scheme-dependent veteran? Drop your take in the comments.